All right, guys, let's bring in former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Michael, a lot of information in Jeff Paul's report about what we might be seeing next. And heading into this meeting between the two leaders yesterday, the reporting indicated that we might be talking today about next steps in the Gaza ceasefire. It sounds like the substance of their conversation was really focused on Iran and the president's openness, discussing renewed possibility of the U.S. Sounds like helping out in whatever's necessary to knock down what Iran is doing. What can you tell us about the difference between Israel's intelligence and U.S. intelligence? Because you did hear the President Trump say, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but Israel seems to be pretty certain that this is going on.
Well, a lot to unpack here, Jackie. Thanks for having me on. First of all, yesterday's meeting was quite a surprise. I think it was a surprise for Israelis. It may have been a surprise for Mr. Netanyahu. President Trump has faced basically two major obstacles in moving forward on the Middle East. First of all, within his own party, there's a rising voices saying that President Trump should spend more time focusing on America first and not on foreign policy issues like Venezuela or Russia and Ukraine, or certainly Israel, Gaza, and Iran. And yesterday, he said, well, we're there, and we're there full force, and even putting a credible military threat back on the table. The other major obstacle he faced was that several months ago, he said that peace had come to the Middle East. There was after 3,000 years of conflict, if you remember this, he had brought peace to the Middle East. And now basically the president's admitting there's more work to be done, both in Gaza, but particularly in Iran, where the Iranians may be rebuilding their missile capacity, maybe even their nuclear facilities. Now, he has said that the U.S. intelligence has not confirmed what the Israeli intelligence has suspected about the rebuilding of those programs. That's not unusual, Jackie. The Israeli intelligence is in the Middle East, it's on the ground. It often sees things before the United States do. And it's what it does, and that's one of the reasons we have such a close intelligence relationship. But the meeting was surprising. Basically, the president said, don't mess with the United States, don't mess with me, and I'm going to keep that credible military threat on the table, both vis-a-vis Iran and Hamas. Is
that important, you think, to Prime Minister Netanyahu's viability? There have been calls for his resignation. He's facing some domestic controversy. President Trump has issued his support for a pardon, obviously. But is it something that is personally important to Netanyahu to sort of reiterate the risk that Iran poses to the region and get buy-in from the administration on another series of strikes, potentially on Iran? And he's also urged, possible action on Hamas if they don't move forward with this peace agreement.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt Mr. Netanyahu politically. And I'll always say that it's premature to eulogize him politically. He's a very powerful person with a pretty solid base here. People don't wake up in the morning and sort of think whether or not they're going to vote for Netanyahu. They're either with him or they're against him. And there's always a solid base that is very much with him. And my assumption is when Israel goes to the polls next year, he'll be a very competitive contender there. He faces many other challenges here, Jackie. It's not just his court issues. There's issues of the ultra-Orthodox service in the military. There's the issue of a state inquiry into the horrendous events of October 7th, 2023. Mr. Netanyahu opposes a state inquiry, wants a political inquiry. And then there's the new scandal we have called Qatar Gate, where members of the Prime Minister's staff are being accused of having taken a salary from Qatar, which is not, well, if it's not an enemy country, it's certainly a frenemy country to the state of Israel. So he's got his hands full. But this meeting was a very successful meeting, and it certainly did not hurt the Prime Minister politically.
Yeah, if anything came out of that, it was that there's no daylight between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, despite some of the reporting to suggest simmering frustration that things aren't moving as quickly as the Trump administration would like in getting to phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement. But it is, as the president says, it's a tough neighborhood that Israel lives in. So thank you very much, Ambassador Michael Oren, for being with us. Appreciate your time.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.